This adventurous story begins by showing a vast kingdom that has just been attacked by enemies. A terrifying gang named Fury starts spreading chaos throughout the region. In fact, this entire gang was summoned by a member of the royal family itself. Not only that, Fury's army also includes several dragons who begin wreaking havoc as soon as they arrive. The kingdom falls into utter ruin, and more than half the people start fleeing for their lives. However, the princess of the kingdom, named Elizabeth, is well aware of her brother Furin's true intentions. She always knew that one day, Furin would rebel, and today, that moment had come. For now, Elizabeth escapes with her loyal companions, taking a dragon egg with her. She believed that currently, they were in no position to fight against her brother or the Fury army. They didn't have enough soldiers left, and the few remaining soldiers of the kingdom had already been swayed to Furin's side. That's why Elizabeth, along with her loyal followers, sets out toward her father's kingdom. She plans to explain everything to him and then use his military strength to launch a counterattack against her brother's forces. Elizabeth was determined to reclaim control of the kingdom, as she knew that Furin would destroy it completely. At present, Elizabeth and her companions are passing through a village, searching for a safe hideout where they can rest. But not long after, they are suddenly attacked by strange, zombie-like humans. These weren't ordinary people, they were undead beings whose bodies no longer functioned, only their minds did. These were a type of zombies, secretly part of Fury's forces. Seeing them, Elizabeth and her group start defending themselves, trying to survive. Unfortunately, their numbers were far too small, and they began to weaken quickly. Even more troubling was the fact that their attacks seemed to have no effect on the zombies. It was as if they were invincible. However, one soldier manages to cut off a zombie's head, and that finally stops it. From that, they realize the only way to kill them is by severing their heads. They all follow this method and eventually survive the attack. Injured and exhausted, they take shelter in a nearby hideout. Some soldiers were seriously hurt during the encounter. Elizabeth explains to them that they must take the dragon egg to her father's kingdom and request help. No matter what, they had to get assistance to defeat Furin and reclaim their kingdom. But the situation had grown extremely critical. Furin's army had become so powerful that any other kingdom would think twice before confronting it. Elizabeth believed that her brother deserved punishment for his betrayal, but right now, their own lives were in danger. As they prepare to move again, a group of strangers arrives at their location. Elizabeth's soldiers point weapons at them, ready for another attack, but the strangers clarify that they mean no harm. They are also fleeing the soldiers to save their own lives and were on their way to the castle. They were looking for a place where they could be safe, but Elizabeth confirmed that the castle was no longer safe. Fury's army and dragons had already taken over, and they would devour everyone alive in an instant. So, Elizabeth gathered everyone together and decided to leave for her father's kingdom. But fear began to spread among the group, as a large shadowy figure appeared in the sky. It was none other than a massive and terrifying dragon, flying directly toward them and landing nearby. Even Elizabeth's soldiers were shocked and stepped back. The dragon roared fiercely and began to prepare for an attack. But Elizabeth realized that the dragon had come for the dragon egg she had with her. So, she ordered her soldiers to place the egg in front of it. The dragon immediately picked up the egg and flew away. Clearly, it had come only for the egg, which was likely its child. Now, with the egg gone, Elizabeth and her group would have to continue empty-handed toward the kingdom. Yet she promised everyone that she would destroy Fury, his soldiers, and reclaim her kingdom. Her brother would only bring suffering and tyranny upon their people. As Elizabeth and her soldiers moved forward, they suddenly came across a massive army of zombies. The horde was so large and vicious that passing through them seemed impossible. Elizabeth quickly ordered her companions to fall back, saying that they would need to find another path. Everyone began discussing how this was the shortest and fastest route, and choosing any alternative would mean taking a long detour. Among the group, two women named Ariel and Danny expressed concern that maybe they shouldn't have left the other soldiers behind. Those soldiers might now see them as traitors and attack them. However, none of them had a choice. Staying back would have only led to death at Furin's hands, so it was in everyone's best interest to escape. Elizabeth reiterated that they must seek help from another kingdom. Otherwise, their numbers would keep shrinking, and they would never be able to rise again. For the moment, to escape the zombies, they entered a shelter. Two soldiers, Richard and George, began comforting everyone, saying that they could still win. George then proposed something bold. He said they needed to take the path through the Dark Kingdom. At the very mention of the Dark Kingdom, everyone stood up in shock. That place was so dangerous, no one who had ever gone there had ever returned. But Richard, George, and Elizabeth all knew that there was no other way. George handed a gold coin to a local villager and told him to take the others and go the opposite way, seeking help from as many kingdoms as possible. There was also a man named Bruss at that location who said he would help Elizabeth in the battle. But George made it clear, they needed soldiers, not just supporters. Bruss didn't know how to fight, and bringing him along would only be a liability. So, Bruss too was sent along with the villagers to ask for help from other kingdoms. Bruss was furious about this decision but had no choice except to go. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and the rest of her team set out toward the Dark Kingdom. Along the way, their conversations were filled with fear and doubt about how dangerous this place truly was. Richard even said that no one who ever entered the Dark Kingdom had returned. No one even knew for sure whether the stories about it were rumors or reality. This uncertainty only made Elizabeth more anxious. If they couldn't survive the journey, how would she ever reclaim her kingdom? On the other side of the story, we see Elizabeth's brother, Furin, who had now secretly taken control of the entire kingdom. He visited their father, Oracle, who until now had no idea that Furin had taken over the kingdom through betrayal. When Oracle saw Furin, he asked about Elizabeth. But Furin lied, saying that Elizabeth was very ill and unable to leave the kingdom. Oracle was satisfied with this explanation, believing that things were fine between the two siblings. But the truth was known only to Furin, and now he had reached Oracle first, likely with a foolproof plan to manipulate him before Elizabeth could tell her side. Back with Elizabeth and her group, they had now entered the territory of the Dark Kingdom. Richard revealed that the Dark Kingdom was inhabited by creatures filled with dark powers, who spared no human that entered their land. As the group moved forward, a flying eagle spotted them from the sky and alerted another group, relaying their location and direction. That group of soldiers began preparing for an ambush. Late at night, Elizabeth and her group stopped to rest. During this time, Elizabeth asked Richard and George to teach her sword fighting. She wanted to protect herself in case of an attack. Training began immediately, and Elizabeth, with determination, began learning quickly, mastering the basics in a very short time. It was already quite late at night, and George was taking great care of everyone, especially Elizabeth, because her father had personally entrusted George with the responsibility of protecting her in every difficulty. By morning, the entire group set out again toward the Dark Kingdom. The place looked so dark that nothing was visible inside. But now, they had no other choice. They had to pass through it if they wanted to reach the other side and reclaim their kingdom. Perhaps none of them would make it back alive, but they had to try. And so, they all moved deeper into the darkness. Meanwhile, we see Furin, who was furious at his men because they had still failed to eliminate Elizabeth. Furin was especially angry because Elizabeth was the only other heir to the kingdom, and as long as she was alive, he couldn't fully claim the throne. Now, Furin didn't want to take any more chances. Instead of sending ordinary soldiers, he dispatched elite warriors from the Fury gang, who were heading directly into the dark forest to hunt them down. These were no ordinary attackers, they were lethal creatures bred for destruction. Back on the other side, we're shown the villagers whom George had paid gold to go to other kingdoms and seek help. They eventually reach the leader of another kingdom, but instead of requesting help for Elizabeth, they beg for their own safety. They give the gold coin to that kingdom's leader and ask him to take them somewhere safe, essentially betraying Elizabeth in the process. The leader agrees and puts them on a boat to his own kingdom, which seemed, so far, safe from all the conflicts. A short while later, we see Bruss again, the same man who was sent with the villagers. But Bruss was secretly following Elizabeth and her team into the Dark Kingdom. Even though George had told him to go with the others, Bruss wanted to prove himself. He believed he too could be a warrior and help Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Fury, the terrifying leader of the creature gang, learns that people have entered the dark forest. He immediately sends some of his deadliest creatures to hunt them down. Back in the forest, Elizabeth and her team continue cautiously forward, unaware of the dangers rapidly approaching. As they clear about half the forest, a massive, hairy creature charges toward them. This creature had razor-sharp claws, so lethal that even a single touch could slice a body apart. Everyone prepares for battle, but surprisingly, the creature stops, looks at someone, and then runs away in fear. No one could understand what had scared such a fearsome beast. Richard and George theorized that there must be other creatures nearby, even more powerful than the one they just saw. Otherwise, that monster would never leave without a fight. With their guard up, Richard and George continue moving forward, protecting Elizabeth, step by step. Soon, the group came face to face with a rock-type creature, its entire body made of solid stone. Richard and George immediately prepared to attack, but Elizabeth stopped them at once. Elizabeth acted with calmness and composure, and tried to communicate with the creature peacefully. She made it understand that they meant no harm, that they were only passing through to reach a safe place, and the Dark Kingdom was just in their path. They promised to leave quickly and not hurt anyone. To everyone's surprise, the creature seemed to understand her peaceful emotions. It allowed them to pass without attacking. When George tried to shake hands with it, the sheer strength of its grip made it clear just how powerful this creature was. George warned Elizabeth, saying, "Not every creature is going to be as peaceful as this one. Many will attack us no matter how gently we try to talk to them." With caution, they all continued their journey. Suddenly, they were ambushed by a large horde of zombie-like creatures. These weren't just a few, there were dozens. It was clear that none of them could fight this battle alone. They had to coordinate as a team to survive. A few zombies managed to capture Errol, a female member of their group, and started dragging her away. Richard and George fought fiercely to stop them. Even Elizabeth, using the sword skills she had learned, joined the battle and fought bravely. After a long and intense fight, they managed to defeat most of the zombies. But just then, the zombie leader arrived, a far more formidable enemy. He caused massive damage and nearly defeated them all. At the last moment, Danny managed to grab the zombie leader from behind, and Richard and George took advantage of the opening to launch a final attack. The leader was finally eliminated. Thinking they were safe, the group started moving again, but new waves of zombies appeared, far greater in number. There were thousands of them, and it was impossible for just 5 soldiers to fight that many. Overwhelmed, the group was captured by the zombies and dragged away. But instead of killing them immediately, the zombies began taking them to their main leader, the guardian of the entire Dark Kingdom. It was this leader who would decide whether the intruders should live or die. Elizabeth and her entire team had now become prisoners of the Dark Kingdom's creatures. The only silver lining was that Bruss was secretly following them into the kingdom. What was shocking was that Bruss, too, was being attacked, but unlike before, he was now fighting back fiercely and winning. Clearly, there was a hidden warrior inside him, just waiting to emerge. As Bruss moved deeper, he noticed dead bodies of various creatures lying scattered along the path. Even though he only knew a little fighting, it was now clear. Bruss was ready for battle. But Bruss knew that he couldn't possibly defeat all those creatures alone. So, he started shouting loudly, pretending that he was the one who had killed them even though, in reality, they had been defeated by Elizabeth and her team. Hearing his loud claims, a group of women warriors from another kingdom arrived. They, too, were searching for Elizabeth. When they asked Bruss who had slain all these creatures, he took full credit, saying that he had done it all by himself. Impressed, the warrior women believed Bruss to be a brave fighter, also on a mission to find Elizabeth. Since they shared the same goal, they didn't harm him and instead welcomed him into their team. Meanwhile, deep inside the dark forest, all the creatures escorting Elizabeth, Richard, and George were shown taking them to their king, a creature named Reptile. He ruled this region, and all the dark creatures obeyed his orders. Reptile was reptile-like in appearance, with a body completely different from that of humans. As they were brought before Reptile, he looked at them and asked, "Why have you come here?" Elizabeth replied calmly and respectfully, "We were just passing through. We have no desire for war." But Reptile laughed, replying, "You may have come in, but you won't be able to leave. The rules of the dark forest are clear, no one leaves without my permission." Suddenly, 2 of Fury's soldiers arrived and informed Reptile, "Do whatever you want with the rest, but Elizabeth must be killed. That is Fury's direct command." Reptile was puzzled. He didn't understand why everyone was after Elizabeth. She was so beautiful, and in fact, he seemed to be smitten by her himself. However, he told the soldiers, "Don't worry. Fury's orders will be carried out. Elizabeth will be killed." Once they left, Reptile made a public announcement. There would be a great fighting competition, and only the winner would be allowed to leave this place. But then he added a cruel condition. "No matter who wins or loses, I will not let Elizabeth go. I will marry her and make her my queen." George and Richard strongly disagreed with this, but Elizabeth calmly intervened. She told them, "Win the competition and get out of here. Saving our kingdom is our top priority." Even in captivity, she was guiding them, laying out the plan. "Reach my father. Rally our soldiers. Then attack Fury's army and save the kingdom." Now it was time for the fight. Reptile sent his best warriors into the arena. George, Richard, and Danny stepped onto the battlefield, ready for the ultimate fight. There were already many creatures there, but now the strongest of Reptile's elite soldiers entered the scene. These were also creatures, much more powerful than the others. 2 of them immediately attacked Richard and Danny, causing severe damage. Richard began to bleed heavily, but both coordinated well and managed to kill the creature. Reptile was shocked to witness this. No one had ever been able to touch his soldiers before, and these were just ordinary humans. How could they have killed his warrior? Suddenly, another creature entered the arena and attacked George. This creature had large horns and fought using chains. Every time George tried to counterattack, it would knock him to the ground. The creature even pierced George's body with a sharp weapon. Despite his injury, George moved cleverly around the chains and struck the creature with his weapon, finally defeating it. While doing so, George pointed at Reddick, signaling that all his warriors had now been defeated. This enraged Reddick even more, and instead of sending more soldiers, he entered the battlefield himself to fight George. A fierce sword fight broke out between the two. Meanwhile, many of Reddick's female warriors attacked Elizabeth, not wanting Reddick's attention to be focused on her. But by now, Elizabeth had mastered significant fighting skills and used them to defeat those female attackers one by one. A brutal war was raging on all sides, and it was uncertain who would come out victorious. Reddick severely injured George with multiple attacks, and it seemed like George might die. But George had always kept a dragon's tooth with him. He used it to stab Reddick directly in the heart. Reddick was badly wounded, and it was clear George could kill him. However, George chose not to hurt him any further, and Reddick finally admitted his defeat. Just then, the women from Elizabeth's kingdom arrived and started attacking Elizabeth and her team. Even the creatures present weren't spared by them. But Errol stepped in and explained that they hadn't abandoned them intentionally, they had to protect Elizabeth, which is why they left. After this explanation, the female warriors understood and calmed down. Even the rock-type creature appeared again to bring peace, explaining that there was no point in fighting among themselves. At that moment, two of Fury's soldiers arrived, and through them, the evil Furion sent a message: no one would survive now. He planned to use dark magic to control everyone and rule the entire Earth. This was the reason he was becoming overly confident. Because Furion had the support of Fury, who possessed vast armies of creatures and immense dark magic, he was becoming extremely powerful. Elizabeth gathered everyone and explained that their real enemy was Furion. It was Furion who, with Fury's help, had been misled into attacking all of them. Therefore, she insisted they stop fighting among themselves and instead unite to fight against Furion and Fury. With this realization, Reddick and his entire army decided to side with Elizabeth. This significantly increased the strength of their combined forces. Every member of the team was now ready for a massive war. On the other side, Furion was shown holding his own father captive. He revealed his plan to his father, that he would kill Elizabeth and take control of the entire kingdom. With Fury's support and the power of dark magic, he could control everyone. Though Furion's father tried to explain that he had become blinded by power and greed, urging him to work together with Elizabeth to rule the kingdom peacefully, ensuring prosperity for everyone, it was clear Furion was no longer acting on his own will. He was being fully controlled by Fury, and everything he said was exactly what Fury wanted him to say. Furion then locked his father away in the castle forever. It was now evident that the upcoming war would be extremely dangerous. But who would win this battle remained a mystery. And with that suspense, our story ends here.